Yeah, because they're getting morphine and coke. Sick. Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Brain Blaze. I, as always, am your host, Simon. Welcome. Once here, one of my writers, in this case, Kevin. It's written me a script. More bizarre experiments scientists should have never conducted. Yes. Whenever it's more, it means we're milking those views. Gotta milk those views. Welcome to the show. Never read it before. That's the format. Previously on Brain Blaze, we discussed turkeys and their attempts to mate with nothing but a stick with a turkey head model on top of it. Yes, I remember finding that quite amusing. However, Simon was rather disappointed that I left you all on a bit of a cliffhanger, so I'm here to right that wrong. Thank you, Kevin. I have no idea what that cliffhanger was. In that episode, I mentioned that the scientists later wrote a paper titled Effects of Morphological Variations of Chicken Models on Sexual Responses of Cocks, in which they tried a similar experiment using white leghorn roosters rather than turkeys, but I never actually mentioned the findings of that paper. Wow, Kevin, we were all on the edge of it. Was I not being sarcastic about that? Was I genuinely interested? Because it sounds like something I just wouldn't be genuinely interested in at all. Maybe I was just like, wow, sounds interesting. We British were very sarcastic. Americans, I feel, you finish your sentences when it's like sarcasm with not. So you're like, yeah, I found that super interesting. Not. And it's like, yeah, we know you were being sarcastic. You don't need to like suffix it with not. It's just unnecessary.
Funny. Yes, but not funny, haha. Funny weird.
Oh, who is the sponsor of today's video? It's none other than our longtime friends over at Squarespace. And honestly, if you're seeing this ad and you haven't got Squarespace yet, you must have absolutely zero need for a website, because there is no better place to go online to make a website other than Squarespace. Squarespace, my website is built with Squarespace. That should be a testament to it. I've got no skills. I mean, in website design and graphics and all of that stuff. I've amazing skills as a YouTube fact boy, but look, when it comes to websites, I don't know what I'm doing. If I design things, they always look terrible. Like, my wife's a designer. She's a graphic designer, and I'll be like, yeah, I want it to look a little bit like this, and I'll draw a little picture, and she'll be like, what have you done? Squarespace, you go on, you log in, you use something called Fluid Engine, which is this drag and drop like website editor. You load a template and then you move everything in, you put it in different places, you put in some images. I've even got like a blurry video background on my website, which I think looks pretty sick. And it's not my genius, it's the template allowed me to do that. Like I said, I've got no design skills. My website looks good. I made it in like an afternoon and it looks good. And I don't know anything. I don't know anything about design. I don't know anything about tech. Squarespace is just the easiest way to make a website. Plus, they have these extensions which allow you to do a whole lot else with your website, sort of like a Swiss Army knife is how they describe it. So you can like add in extra bits of tech as you might need it. Plus, they have email campaigns. Before I found out about this on Squarespace, I used to pay a lot of money to another company to do email campaigns. I don't understand why it was so expensive. That whole service cost more than my Squarespace subscription, which includes the main thing of a website. Why wouldn't you use it? It's amazing. And they've got analytics. They've got all of that stuff you expect, like blogging tools, I don't know, social media integrations. It's all there. It's all easy to use. You don't have to worry about a thing. So look, when you're ready to get started with Squarespace, which you obviously should be, did you not see this ad? Go to squarespace.com/blaze or click the link in the description below and you'll get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. That's right, 10%! Amazing. Just use the promo code BLAZE at checkout. Thank you for watching this ad. I love you. And now back to today's video. It turns out that roosters are no less picky than turkeys, though they have different desires. The turkeys would attempt to mate with anything that had a turkey head on it, while the roosters would attempt to mate with any chicken body, regardless of whether it had a head attached or not. Holy sh**. However, if there wasn't a head attached to the body, the roosters, while still horny, would be a bit confused and unsure which end of the chicken were they were supposed to have sex with. Oh my god, are they mating with the neck hole? What the f***, roosters? Roosters are f***ing sick.
Yeah, that smell never really goes away.
I hope I've finally given the closure that you needed. You have, Kevin. And I'll try not to leave your intellectual curiosity with blue balls this time. But with that out of the way, it's time for some more weird science. Let's go! Rubber hand illusion. There are a surprising number of scientific research papers on this topic, and it's really strange to see the word illusion in the title of scientific papers. Well, that's because you're thinking of magic illusions, but there's plenty of illusions that go on in medicine. But that's really all this is, an illusion to trick a person into thinking that a rubber hand is their own. The way the experiment was designed, the test subject's left hand would be placed behind a partition out of their field of view. Okay, I'm following so far. A lifelike rubber hand is then placed on the near side of the partition where they could see it, and a cloth was placed over their shoulder, extending down to the rubber hand to make sure it looked like it could be connected. It's basically the same setup you would see at a haunted house where somebody was going to pretend to chop their hand off with a meat cleaver. Once everything was set up, both the rubber hand and the person's hand would be stroked simultaneously with a paintbrush, always brushing in the same location and direction on both hands. Oh, okay, I see. So you're making it think that you're tricking the person into thinking that the rubber hand is their hands, and then you're going to smash it with a hammer or something, aren't you? Their brain activity was also being recorded with a functional MRI scanner to show which areas of the brain had activity following certain stimuli. Oh my god, wait, aren't MRI machines those giant machines that you have to be slotted into? Before I was like, okay, this experiment needs like a rubber hand and a desk and a volunteer and a f***ing MRI machine. That's an MRI machine, right? They're massive. How are you doing this? How are they at the desk with the MRI? Perhaps the most important part of the experiment is that the subjects weren't being tricked on any psychological or cognitive level. They were fully aware that they were looking at a rubber hand, and the researchers could even talk to them about the fact that they were brushing both the rubber hand and the real hand in the same way. Intellectually, these people were 100% aware that the hands they could see was fake, and no attempt was made to convince them otherwise. After all, I don't think any sort of ethics board would allow an experiment to test the limits of gaslighting. Wait. Yes, it would. I feel like this has definitely happened. Like, isn't gaslighting something that people test? I feel like it is. But it didn't matter what they consciously knew. When asked to point to their left hands, the majority of subjects would instinctively point to the rubber hands rather than their real hands. And when the scientists went to suddenly stab the rubber hands with a needle, the MRIs showed that the subjects' brains lit up in the way that you would expect if a person was anticipating pain, and they would pull back their real hand to avoid being stabbed. In short, through multisensory input, the researchers had forced the brain to take ownership of the rubber hand, treating it as if it were a part of the person's body. I'm not going to pretend that this isn't pretty cool, but at the same time, I'm not really sure what the point is. This research would have proven really... Oh yeah, this is pointless. Pointless scientific things. I'd love to try this. I'd really like to have this set up, because I think I'll just be able to be like, no, I know it's not real. 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 And then they'd stab it with a needle. I'd be like, no, it's not real. I know it's not real. Wait, did they know that they were suddenly going to get stabbed? Because then I think that would be much more like, I wouldn't fall for that. I would fall for that, rather than if someone tell me I'm going to stab your hand right now, then I'll be like, I'm just going to leave it where it is. Because I think even if it was my real hand and someone was like, you just got to have it there and it's going to hurt, I'd be like, okay. How much money am I getting paid again, boss?
You're getting 30 grand? I'm getting 1,000!
You guys are getting paid?
This research would have proven really useful for the development of mirror box therapy used to treat phantom limb pain, were it not for the fact that mirror box therapy was invented 2 years before this research even took place. Mirror box therapy, I don't know if Kevin's going to go into it, but it's crazy. It's like if you've lost your arm in a war or whatever, and you don't have like a hand, and then you get that pain in your hand that's not there. It's like phantom limb pain or whatever. So what they do is they put you in front of a mirror, which mirrors this hand. So it looks like so your brain thinks like you have your old hand back, and then they can like treat the pain in the hand or something crazy, which is wild. The brain is so stupid. We all have stupid brains.
That's it, mister. You just lost your brain privileges.
The only potential future application seems to be for creating more immersive VR experiences. Cool. I mean, that's an application, isn't it? VR's amazing. But even in this regard, it's unlikely to lead to any developments that wouldn't have taken place anyway. For now, the only practical use that the rubber hand illusion seems to have is as a sideshow attraction at carnivals and as a way to get millions of views on TikTok. All my children. Moulay Ismail ibn Sharif was the longest reigning sultan of Morocco, ruling for 55 years. He was nicknamed Moulay Ismail the Bloodthirsty by Europeans because of his astonishing level of cruelty and his overeager execution of slaves. Oh, at first I was like, okay, must be modern times because he was the longest ruler. So you're always like, well, that's always modern people because obviously healthcare's improved. No, but this guy was killing slaves, so it's back in the day. But it wasn't blood that Ismail was so thirsty for. It was pussy. Oh, okay. There was a fair chance that you've never heard of the Sultan before. I have not. But if you have, it's probably in the context of him siring over 1,000 children with his 68 wives and 500 concubines. Oh my good lord.
I like boobies.
It was largely taught that Moulay Ismail had 888 children, though that number has since increased, and Guinness lists it as 1,042, beating out Genghis Khan. Then again, Guinness doesn't know anything about anything, so I wouldn't take their word for it. Yeah, allegedly, Guinness is just like, I think I made a video once about how Guinness works and how you got to pay for it. They come out and they do all of this thing, and it's kind of, in my opinion, and the opinions of some other people who aren't me as well, and allegedly, kind of bullshit. Kind of bullshit, really, isn't it? Allegedly.
In a stunning turn of events, a superhero is being sued.
Researchers Elizabeth Oberzacher and Karl Grammer weren't going to just take their word for it either. So in 2013, they decided a good use of the University of Vienna's resources was to determine whether or not it was possible for a man to actually have that many children. Wait. Why wouldn't it be? I suspect that Karl was extremely disappointed with the final choice of methodology. Oh, Kevin, that was nice. That's a very good joke. I like that. As they used computer models rather than testing the theory experimentally. According to historical records, by 1703, Moulay Ismail had already had 868 children, and his 700th son was born in 1727, shortly after his death, presumably from dehydration. Oh, Kevin, this is a funny script. I like this. I'm not really sure why this was so important to study, especially since it seems easy to figure out with some back-of-the-envelope calculations. Moulay Ismail was married multiple times in 1670, 2 years before he became sultan, though it's unclear whether or not these were his first marriages. Either way, that still gave him 57 years to sire children. That's almost 21,000 days, so it seems almost extremely plausible, since he had more than enough wives and concubines for there to always be a vacant womb. Personally, I'm already satisfied with that answer, but I guess that's why I'm not a scientist. Yeah, I'm satisfied. Yes, he could have 1,000 children. Sure, why not? It's weird. I mean, Elon Musk's on his way. Why do you have so many children? As a few different computer models were used, factoring in cultural norms, rate of miscarriages, and child mortality, as well as assuming that somebody was tracking when the women were ovulating to ensure maximum likelihood of conception. According to their results, it is absolutely possible for Moulay Ismail to have the 1,171 children that they believe he did, and it would have only required him to have sex an average of 1.5 times per day. Fuck yeah! While I doubt he was sustaining that same pace into his 80s, I'm sure he was greatly exceeding it in his 30s. But despite claims that his children were still being born after he died, the researchers didn't even extend his sexual activity for his entire life in the computer models. The paper published in the peer-reviewed journal PLOS 1 determined that Moulay Ismail could have sired 1,171 children in only 32 years of sexual activity, and that didn't require nearly as large a harem as he is reported as having. Of course, the paper never mentioned why they were testing this particular story or what relevance it was supposed to have. As far as I can gather, the most actionable piece of information in this research is the cost-benefit analysis on the harem size. If you genuinely wanted to have 1,000 children, there's actually no need to house and feed hundreds of sex slaves. Only 65 to 70 women are required to produce that number of offspring, making the optimal harem size between 65 and 110. Wow, it's really good that someone did this research. It's really important and useful. That number is much more manageable, to the point of it being totally doable. You don't need to have an entire nation worship you as some kind of god king. You just need to be the unquestioned leader of a small to medium-sized cult. Though the story only came to worldwide prominence in the 1930s, tales of the Loch Ness Monster. Oh, I see. Did I miss a title? Yes, I did. I was like, wow, that change pace fast. The title that I missed was Welcome to Jurassic Loch. Though the story only came to worldwide prominence in the 1930s, tales of the Loch Ness Monster date back hundreds of years, potentially all the way to the 7th century. Despite all of the claims of sightings and shitty photographs, there is yet to be any real evidence of the non-existent monster. Indeed, there isn't. I've talked about this at length on another channel/podcast that I do called Decoding the Unknown, where we debunked the shit out of all of that nonsense. Where we debunk the shit out of a lot of nonsense. Check it out if you want to. It's certainly not for lack of trying either. One of the latest attempts came in 2019 when scientists took hundreds of samples from Loch Ness to test for DNA. From these samples, they were able to extract 500 million gene sequences, all of which were compared to the global DNA database containing every cataloged species of plant, animal, and bacteria that we know of. Unlike the previous experiments, at least this had a very clear goal: get people to finally shut the fuck up about the non-existent Loch Ness Monster. Honestly, this one, scientists, you're doing fucking God's work, because stop it! People, you idiots! Unsurprisingly, the scientists did not find a single trace of kaiju DNA among their 500 million samples. In fact, almost nothing about the results was surprising. They found that DNA for every species that was known to live in the loch, as well as human DNA, but alas, there were no plesiosaur genes among the samples extracted from the lake. Shocking, we know. The only surprise was that there was a much higher than expected amount of eel DNA. This led to speculation that perhaps people who thought they saw Nessie actually had just seen a giant eel. There isn't any evidence of oversized eels existing in the lake, but there isn't any evidence of a 1,100-pound reptile from the early Jurassic period existing in the lake either. But somehow people won't shut the fuck up about it. Idiots. But that latter half is what makes this research seemingly pointless. To a rational person, this may look like yet another piece of definitive proof that the Loch Ness Monster doesn't exist. But to the irrational person, the scientists just failed to find any of its DNA. They had 500 million samples, irrational person. Get your shit together.
Get it all together and put it in a backpack. All your shit. So it's together.
The researchers even admitted that their experiment is unlikely to change anybody's minds. It's impossible to prove a negative, which calls into question why they bothered in the first place. Welcome to Jurassic Cock. While we're on the topic of dinosaurs, weren't they the coolest? When I was growing up in the 80s, everybody loved dinosaurs. Between The Land Before Time, Denver the Last Dinosaur, what the fuck is that? Never heard of that one. And Jurassic Park, people couldn't get enough of these green, scaly monsters. But as always, scientists had to come along and ruin everything cool. Tyrannosaurus Rex literally translates to king of the tyrant lizards. Yet scientists suddenly wanted to tell us that dinosaurs were actually covered in feathers because they were just basically birds. How lame is that? Sadly, the fact that non-avian dinosaurs were theropods, the same classification as modern birds, is now common knowledge. This is essentially the death of dinosaur fiction as we know it. Sure, stories can always adapt and incorporate this new information, but is it really worth it? Would you have been still excited about watching the Jeep in Jurassic Park try and outrun a T-Rex if instead of roaring like a monster it was yelling "buck, buck, buck"? Maybe I'm overreacting, and if we do see dinosaurs in film or television again, then a research paper from 2014 will help ensure their movements are more realistic than ever. The Ig Nobel Prize-winning paper was titled "Walking Like Dinosaurs, Chickens with Artificial Tails Provide Clues About Non-Avian Theropod Locomotion." Scientists, I swear you try and make your papers sound boring on purpose. In other words, stick a plunger on a chicken's butt and it will walk like a T-Rex. Obviously, the fake tails weren't actually plungers, but they sure looked like them. For the experiment, they raised chickens with long fake tails attached to them to see how the shift in center of mass would affect the way they walked. In addition to the regular control group, there was also a weighted control group where the chickens were made to carry the weight of the tail without changing their center of mass. There were a lot of measurements taken on bone development, joint flexibility, gait, and everything else relevant to the study. This just sounds a little bit unnecessarily cruel, and I know, science is, mostly just the genocide of mice, but it's this seems a bit weird, doesn't it? Is it just a bit weirdly unnecessary? In the pursuit of knowledge, is this really knowledge that we need to pursue? More importantly, their paper also included a video, so it's probably easier if Sam or Lorelei, just the editors of this channel, throws up a few seconds of the chicken walking rather than having me try to explain it. I mean, we can all imagine this, can't we? I'm not going to see this video until this video is edited, but I can imagine it. I can imagine it waddling along with a big old, plunger stuck to its arse. The final analysis concluded by saying that sticking a plunger on a chicken made it walk in a way that we expected dinosaurs to walk, so ultimately they didn't learn anything new from this. This experiment's main contribution to society is providing us with a video of a funny-looking cock. Stop the pigeon. I've included this last entry just for you, Simon, because I'm pretty sure your children are at a perfect age for you to benefit from this research. Let's go!
Don't do it.
Has one of your kids ever proudly handed you a drawing that they made? They did it this morning, only for you to look at it and immediately think that it's a piece of trash far from deserving being displayed on your fridge. Oddly enough, my fridge isn't magnetic. It's got some sort of plastic covering on it, which makes it non-magnetic, so there are no pictures on the fridge. But yes, Kevin, and my future children who are watching this, if you're older now, I'm sorry. You did some really bad drawings. Some of them are nice, and it warms my heart, but they're truly bad. My daughter handed me a picture this morning. She said, "Dad, this is for you. It's a gift." And it was I'm like, "What is it?" And she's like, "These are triangles." And I'm like, "Yeah, sort of. They're really neatly colored in." And she says, "Yeah, Mum did that." I know it can be hard to be honest and crush your child's dreams, but thanks to Japanese researcher Shigeru Watanabe, you can have a pigeon do it for you. Working out of the National Institutes of Health, Shigeru published a 2009 paper, Pigeons Can Discriminate Good and Bad Paintings by Children. Really? It's a completely self-explanatory title and it delivers on its promise. First, a number of children's paintings were sorted into good and bad piles by human adjudicators. This is harsh. Pigeons were then taught to peck at the good paintings by rewarding them with snacks. After 22 training sessions, all of the pigeons involved were able to peck at the good paintings and ignore the bad ones with an extremely high level of accuracy. So, was this just memorization? No, not at all. Once sufficiently trained, the pigeons were then exposed to paintings that they'd never seen before, but which humans had already graded. Again, all of the pigeons were able to separate the good paintings from the bad ones. The research should show it some different modern art and see what the pigeons think. The researchers took it a step further, seeing how the pigeons would respond if the image was scaled down, partially covered, or put into grayscale. Partially covering the image and scaling it down had little to no effect on the result unless the image was shrunk to the point of being unrecognizable. Grayscale, on the other hand, made it very difficult for the pigeons to tell good and bad artwork apart, showing that they were judging the paintings both on the shapes and patterns as well as the color palette used. It's a pretty bizarre experiment, though honestly, I wish I had access to a few of those pigeons. People love shows like MasterChef Junior and Kids Baking Championship. Just have pigeons can rate that shit. I feel like there could be a lot of money in a similar style painting competition, but with pigeons as judges. Well, just train your own pigeons. This would be kind of an amazing show, Kevin. I genuinely think you're onto something. But the whole thing is still a little weird, so I decided to dive a little deeper into Shiggy's publication history to look at some more of his research. For a few years, he seemed to be publishing nothing but pigeon-related research papers, which makes me wonder if it personally could be contracted by Mike Tyson to perform these experiments. What's Mike Tyson got to do with pigeons? Did I miss something? However, a few years after this study, he did a similar experiment involving mice. This time, Shigeru wasn't trying to teach the mice to adjudicate paintings, he just wanted to see if they had a preference for some artists over others. What? I know this video is about pointless science experiments, but this really is mega pointless.
What do you want?
It's not that simple.
What do you want?
Unsurprisingly, they didn't. Similar research in the past has shown that when mice were given the choice between Beethoven and Miles Davis, they chose silence. Mice have no interest in human form of expression, and the mice involved in the research showed no preference between Renoir and Picasso, at least not at first. The mice were then conditioned to associate Picasso's paintings with receiving injections of morphine, and let me tell you, those mice loved Picasso after that. Why are you doing this? It took them no time at all to be able to distinguish between Renoir's work and Picasso's, and just like with the pigeons, it was a memorization. The mice would be presented with paintings that they'd never seen before, and they would immediately pick out the Picasso. Yeah, that's because Picasso and Renoir look really different. I feel like an untrained mouse would be able to tell the difference. And if there wasn't a Picasso present, they'd pick out a painting done in his style, whatever it took to get that sweet, sweet morphine. Something similar had been done in the music experiments, giving the mice cocaine when they listened to Miles Davis. I guess the main takeaway from these experiments is that mice can absolutely tell the difference between all sorts of man-made art, they just don't really care. The only thing mice care about is drugs. Yeah, because they're getting morphine and coke. Sick. What the fuck, Roosters? Roosters are fucking sick.
Yeah, that smell never really goes away.